everybody, this is John Desatel, and I am here in our beautiful home in Roxborough Park, Colorado, um, with you this evening. It's snowing outside, and if you guys didn't know me in Florida, I'm not used to this cold weather, so I'm dressed a little warm. The reason I'm making this video is I've had quite a few people ask me lately, how do you buy a second home? So rather than me typing one of my long-winded messages on social media that half people probably wouldn't read, and I don't blame them, I figured I'd make a video. And I want to backpedal because this is something I've been passionate about personally my entire career. I've worked with a lot of people on buying second homes. My wife and I, as you guys know, own a second home. I'm in it right now. So how do you buy one? Here I am, second home. Started my career in 1989. And as you guys know as well, I spent a long time in the mortgage business. And so there's a couple components. Let's get right to business on what comprises buying a second home. Well, first of all, we really need to define what is a second home. And there's a gray area out there in the marketplace, depending on who you talk to. Different lenders have different guidelines. The IRS has its own set of guidelines. And you, the consumer, probably have your own set of guidelines. What's a second home? Well, a second home, to me, is a home that we use as a vacation or another place that we live. You know, we have a second life. Now, where the problem comes in is with the lending industry. And let's start from the beginning. Let's say that you said, John, I want to buy a second home. I love where I live. Let's use Florida as an example. And we're just going to use ourselves. We love Florida. We love a lot of things about Florida. Love the beaches. We love the weather. We love the palm trees, the tropical trees, all of our friends that are there. But I absolutely hate the humidity, the bugs, and the traffic, and it just drives me nuts in the summertime because I can't take the heat. And I love the mountains. So first thing you have to do if you really want to own a second home, as stupid as this sounds, is you've got to decide, where do you want to live? Why is that so important? Because second homes have a huge price swing. You know, Boone, Blowing Rock, North Carolina, Hawaii, Colorado, Portugal. There's this enormous swing in prices from the Finger Lakes up in New York to Costa Rica, from $115,000 to as big as your budget would allow, 20 million bucks. So I always say to people, before we go down this big long, how do you do it technically, you got to figure out, where do you want to live? Where do you visualize yourself? We had the beach in Florida, but we didn't have the mountains. We didn't have the dry air, the streams and the rivers and all that good stuff. We do have the rivers in Florida, but not the same as Colorado River to me. So once we decided that we wanted a mountain life, and I'm using ourselves as an example because a lot of you guys are maybe struggling with the same thing, we had to decide what mountain area in the United States. We looked at the mountains up in Vermont, where my family's from on my dad's side. We looked at Asheville, North Carolina, gorgeous, absolutely love it, Blue Ridge Parkway. For me, being a real estate broker, I was a little worried that Asheville was a little small, and so was Burlington, Vermont. How can I grow my business? Back to you guys, one of the many things you have to consider is, am I buying a second home because I'm retired? We take you down one fork in the road. If you're going to actually work, it's so important to understand, what industry are you in? Can you work from home? Is your employer going to allow you to work from that location? And so on and so on. One of the big things that attracted us to Metro Denver, and why we chose Denver over Asheville and Burlington, Jackson Hole, Wyoming, which we couldn't have afforded anyways, I'm just throwing that in there, was direct flights. And one of the most important things in this video, and again, some of this stuff is self-evident, I cannot begin to tell you how many people I've had in my career go and buy a $500,000 second home, not realizing that they have to make 2-3 connecting flights to get to the damn second home, and $1,600 in airline tickets later, they hardly ever use it. So knowing those routes from point A, your point A primary residence, to point B, your second home to B, is so important, because what good is a second home if you can't either readily drive to it or readily fly to it? Now, if you're only going to go to the second home once a year, John, I'm going to live 6 months in Florida and then I'm going to go to my second home. Okay, all right, fair enough. Then maybe a second tier Billings, Montana, or, and I'm not dogging Billings as a bad second tier. I'm talking about size of city, municipality, airport. A second tier city might be an option. Las Cruces, New Mexico. We have a home in Las Cruces. Originally, it was going to be my second home, but trying to get a direct flight into Las Cruces, forget about it. So usually, you're going Tampa, Atlanta, El Paso, and driving up or whatever. So you say, all right, what's my personality like? How often am I going to use this second home? Am I going to actually use the damn thing? I have a lot of clients that buy the second home. I gotta have it. It's an ego trip. Look at me. And look, we've all been there. And then they don't use it. They're in it like 2 weeks of the year, maybe. And at that point in time, guys, go get a dang Airbnb. Seriously. Don't spend your money on a second home. Now, from an investment standpoint, it's a different video for a different day. But for his needs, am I going to actually need this second home? Then you have to analyze yourself. How often are you going to need it? And second part is maintenance. So when Mel and I, back to Colorado, we decided on Denver, big metropolitan area, easy to fly in, 3.5 hours. Got my real estate license out here so that I could work. Best of both worlds for you guys. The second thing was, it was a big enough market for me to grow my business. For me, those were my needs. Had the exact opposite of Florida, so that I had the different type of climate and topography and everything else. But another obvious is, what kind of property are we going to buy? And I know budget was coming down we're going to talk about budget in a minute. We have a high maintenance beach home. So we got this lovely mid-century home. For you guys that have been to our house, it's an awesome little mid-century home, but it is a money pit. And every time we go back to Florida, all I do is work on the damn house. Home Depot, work on house. Home Depot, work on house. If you're living in a house as a primary residence, for all you guys out there that love tinkering on your house, that's wonderful. But my God, when you come to a second home, the last thing you want to do is have all these dreams. I'm going to go to the mountain, and I'm going to parasail, and I'm going to horseback ride, or whatever you're into, and you're right back to Home Depot. So thank God for my wife. She's probably a better agent than I am. We picked a paired home. So we've got a single family, shares a wall on land, kind of a quasi condo, but they take care of the yard. Cool thing is, I don't have to do any exterior maintenance here at all. One of my big recommendations for you guys, unless you're super handy general contractor into fixing stuff, is if you're going to look at a second home, especially in a hostile environment, and I mean hostile like this is ice cold snow. I do not want to get out there shoveling snow from here all the way down to some huge driveway. I don't want to do it. So Mel convinced me, instead of another single family, let's get a paired home where we don't have to deal with any exterior maintenance. So that was the next thing, is to know your own abilities, your own needs. So important, the type of structure you pick, townhomes, villas, condos, single families. What is your personality, and are you realistically going to be able to take care of that second home? Again, we're lucky here. It has been so low in maintenance. Third thing is, let's talk budget. And I don't mean to insult any of you guys out there, like, duh. But I see a lot of people that get kind of hoodwinked by some people in our industry that, oh, you can rent a second home and make a killing. I get it. And that's a wonderful thing. But we have all sorts of tax implications and lending liabilities and legalities on how are we treating that second home legally If we're buying it with the intention of renting it all year long, especially if we're coming in doing like a 1031 with the IRS, you've got rules on how many days you can actually use that property. So budget for us was very important. What did Mel and I personally look at? We said, if our business goes to hell and we cannot afford to maintain the mortgage or the home on, the expense on our second home, for us, can we rent it to cover the night? Can we cover principal, interest, taxes, insurance, HOA fees, possible maintenance, realistically, and completely wash it? And to me, having the peace of mind when you buy a second home, now obviously, again, if you guys got a ton of money, you're sitting on a pile of money, who cares? Go enjoy life. But if you're one of the people out there that you'd love to do it, and you're trying to figure out how to actually make the mathematics work, my suggestion to you is this: never buy a second home more than what a reasonable tenant would pay to cover your expenses. And you've got to figure out vacancy factor. I'm going to have it vacant once in a while. I'm going to have some repairs. You're going to hear some pie in the sky from unfortunately, some agents around the country that say, oh, you can get 30 grand, 50 grand, 100 grand. Maybe you can. But you want to back that up with accurate rental history and not just from one property. Because you can always get that lucky one owner that knows really how to market the living daylights out of their property. You need a pool of people that you can say, I want to see 5 or 6 comparable properties in that neighborhood or in that condo building that are similar in design, similar in size, similar in view, and amenities and all this good stuff. And I want to see what they've rented for. And not just rented for, but rented for with the type of use that I would do. Obviously, you might have a condo that's rented and maybe generating $80,000 in some rental pool. But if that condo is generating 80 grand, but it's fully occupied, it's not exactly a second home. Then we got a different video for an investment property, right? So getting that data from similar owners that are renting the property that can support rental income and still allow you to cover the liability is important. Next thing is you got to talk to your lender about how many days or how many months you can rent the property and still maintain the second home. Because when you go and apply for a mortgage, you're going to tell that lender either it's a primary residence, it's a second home, it's an investment property. The lender gives you better pricing, better rate on a second home, normally, not always, but normally, than they do on a rental property. So if you're telling your lender it's a second home, first thing, they're going to usually make you qualify for both payments. So the payment you have now in your primary residence and the payment on the house you're going to buy. That's where we get into some mischief on debt ratio on second home buyers, because they say, well, God, John, I don't make enough for my debt ratio to cover these 2 house payments for my lender. My lender's like, hey. Now, some lenders will allow you to use second home rental income if there's a tenant in place when you buy it, and or you have a tenant you're putting in it. But again, the lender is going to say you have to be able to occupy it X number of days or weeks or months of the year. So that's one of the most important things in this video, is for you to talk to the lender up front to see what their rules are, because there's a ton of them, and I've been out of the business too damn long on that side to know all the rules. But I think that's very important. And you say, well, how the hell do I afford it? I've had several people on my Facebook feed. How do I actually afford to do this? How did Mel and I afford to do this? Well, we're not rich. I wish we were. I wouldn't be making these videos and working all the time. A couple of different ways you could do it. Most second homes with good credit, good income, good, the lenders that I'm working with, and if I've got lenders watching this, they're like, no, John, that's not true. I apologize up front. My lender partners are doing like 90% financing max. So if you said, I want to buy $100,000 property, it's 10 grand down. Simple math, right? Um, 10 grand down, $100,000 property, good luck to all of us, but it's an easy number. Plus closing costs, unless the seller's paying the closing costs, blah, blah, blah. So you're like, well, where the hell do I get this 10%? What if I don't have even the 10%? Mel and I were a little lucky. We had a rental property we sold and used the money from the rental property for part of our down payment. And we used some equity on our primary residence, actually, a very, very tiny amount. You can borrow from your primary residence if you have the equity. Let's say you have a primary residence worth $500 and you only owe $250. We have a ton of clients go out and get an equity line on the primary residence. They don't want to refinance the whole primary residence, especially if you had 3.5% and now it's 6 or 7%. So they're like, screw that. I'm not refinancing my primary residence, taking on more debt, but how do I get a down payment? One of the things that our clients have done for years is they go get an equity line or a fixed term second on their primary residence. And then they use that, and you got to disclose, you can't lie. Then you use that money, you season it, you put it in the bank, your equity line, you draw it out, let's say you put it in the bank, and then you apply for the new second home, but now you have a down payment. And again, a lot of you guys have done well on paper in the last couple of years because your property values have gone way up. Most of the equity lines that we've worked with the banks, 80-85% of the appraised value of the property. Again, it's all over the map, depends on the lender. I've seen some more, some less, but let's say half a dozen equity lines that I've personally kind of guided clients to get. The bank will take 85% of the value of your primary residence, subtract the first mortgage, guys, and any other liens, and then whatever that 85% is, 85% of 500 less the first mortgage, and then that would be the maximum equity line you would qualify for. But let's say you get it, 50 grand. John, I got 50 grand on equity line. Okay, now as long as you debt ratio, you could theoretically qualify to buy a 10% down property, $500,000 property. So you got your 10% down, $500,000 property. And by the way, Mel and I did very similar numbers, just so you guys know. We did 20% at 20, 25. But that's how we sandwiched it. So in our particular case, rental property, equity line, combine the money, put the money down to avoid the mortgage insurance. Because again, if you're not putting 20% down, and then again, there's always exceptions. There's portfolio loans, self-insured loans, all sorts of goofies, quasi subprime alt-A loans. But if you're getting a loan that has MI, we did not want to pay mortgage insurance, especially on a second home. So we had to put the 20% down. Absolutely, we're not having it any other way. So OPM, guys, other people's money in the sense it's your money, it's your equity, but you're borrowing that money from A to buy B. Another thing with second homes is I have a listing right now on one. The owner is willing to finance with the down payment. They're actually willing to do owner financing. We've had second homes in my career where somebody wanted out. They're like, I don't want to go to Orlando anymore. I hate it. I hate the traffic, whatever. I will sell this. I'll owner finance it. I've got a capital gain. Bring me a solid buyer, John. I just want rid of the liability. I'm not kidding you. I mean, we've had buyers buy with little to no money down owner financing. Not too much in recent years because traditional rates have been so cheap. Well, who the hell's going to go get owner financing? But it's possibly coming back now. And so you say, well, God, how do I do this? Owner financing is a way to do it. CLTV. You could get a first mortgage, and let's say that you got a first mortgage for 80%, you got 10% down, but you don't have the 20%. Now again, back to your lender. Some lenders might allow a CLTV, combined loan to value of 90. Ask the lender. I don't want to get in mischief. But So you do a first mortgage traditional for 80%. You put 10% down. You went and borrowed on your home equity line that you disclosed. And then the seller could possibly hold a second. We've had that in our career too. I mean, the seller's like, I don't have to have all the money now. I'll do a small second mortgage. I want to sell to these people. Um, I really do, John, and I'll take a second back. That's another scenario for you guys that have some money for the down payment, but you don't have quite enough. Um, Agreement for deed. Now, not to go squirrel on you guys. Um, Land contracts in Ohio, agreement for deed in Florida. You basically are obtaining a property with the agreement that after so many payments, you're building kind of an equitable interest. They hold the deed. Title would pass. We get into all sorts of legal. Do they have a lien underneath? It can become a wraparound, very dangerous for you. But let's pretend they had a free and clear property. And let's pretend that it's somebody you guys sort of kind of know. And you have a year left to really save more money and a year left to build your credit a little more. But you're jonesing to buy that house from them. Technically, you could do an agreement for deed. We've done it many times. Little more involved in a lease purchase. It implies, in some regard, really ownership. But and I know people are like, huh? You can do this stuff. It's done. I've done it. All of these things I've personally done many times in my career. So that's another thing you could do. We've even had people trade. Had a Harley Davidson 20 years ago that a guy gave to a seller for a down payment. Now, one of the big problems is, again, always go back to your lender, because we don't want to have a problem where you get in trouble with the law. Hey, I use this as a down payment. But there are ways where you can sometimes use personal property as a partial down payment on these second homes. Now, rental. You still rent a second home. And I don't want you guys to think you cannot rent a second home. Most lenders will allow you to rent it. It's a question of the rules of the individual lender. But you say, all right, how do I rent it? Guys, I've got people, I cannot even begin to tell you how many of my own social media friends have done this. They're on I used VRBO. Years ago, I had a Winter Park, not Florida, Winter Park condo here in Colorado. And my ex and I used it as a second home rental, hybrid. We did not want to pay the high rental fees in a resort area that they wanted to charge us. So we said, well, let's try on our own. We rented the shit out of that property for years. We set it up on VRBO, which is a third-party website, and we put a lockbox on the door, and we charge people a huge cleaning fee up front, but we reimburse them the cleaning fee if they left the unit spotless for the next person. So they could do a self-clean and take a picture, send it to us in an email of the different rooms, and then we reimburse them the whole cleaning fee. And they loved it, because a lot of times these third parties are charging, well, you guys know if you've gone and stayed in an Airbnb in the last year or two, it's like, holy crap, the cleaning fee is more than the rent. So in our case, though, we self-managed it. We put it on that website. Over the years, Craigslist, HomeAway, which I think bought them. Of course, Airbnb. But a lot of people would be amazed at how, and I don't want to say easy. Property management is not easy. It's a pain in the ass. But doable for you, the potential homeowner, to rent your second home out. It's not rocket science, guys. Case in point, our beach home. Now, we have to rent our beach home if we're thinking about doing it when we're not there. Eventually, we have to rent it for 90 days for the city of St. Pete Beach, where we live. But we don't have to be there at peak season. A lot of people, they buy a second home not understanding that sometimes peak season's not the place and time to be. Now, if it is, okay. I don't want to be in Florida when all the tourists are in Florida. No offense to you guys that are tourists. I want to be there in May, September, October. So I can rent that second home of mine for peak season at peak prices. And peak prices are a lot higher than off season. Those peak prices pay hell 3/4 of the entire year of our debt service on that property, just for peak season. Um, Studying, so what are you saying, John? Study the market and see what peak season is, because most second homes, not all, are in vacation destinations. Gatlinburg, Tennessee is another one. And let's say you're like, you're right, John. I could use this place off peak. Then it's important to get those rental rolls for the peak season, because that'll give you a much better idea of your kind of spike in the rents. Another thing you can do is pool. You're like, what? I've had clients go in, several different families pool together to buy a second home. Now you got to make sure you guys are really close, because if you ever have a misunderstanding or a blow up, you ruin the friendship. Sell the property and closing costs and so on and so on. But my Canadians, I've had, I don't know, probably half a dozen Canadians in my life pool, come together as completely separate families, and they will go in together. And some lenders will do this. Again, check with your lender. And they'll buy it almost like their own timeshare. That way you've got 2 and even 3 families sharing. $500,000 property is a lot of money for a second home to a lot of people. But if you're sharing it with another family, and you can work out with that family that they're going to use it in November, you'll use it in December, why not? We get into, of course, all this issues of how you want to decorate, your privacy, and those are different issues that you have to. But if it's a pure mathematics and you're really close to a family or friends, and you've been lifelong family friends, and you're going to the same place, and it's purely a matter of, God, we want to buy so bad in Madeira Beach, Florida, but we just don't have a $500,000. We've got $250,000. Pooling together is a great way, and that's my term. Other people call it something else. It's a great way for you to be able to do so. Now, timeshares. I am not a big fan of timeshares, and if you guys are out there selling them, I'm sorry. I don't want to piss you off, but I'm not a fan. I don't like the idea. I'll do a different video, a different day, a whole video on why I don't like timeshares. But technically, could you buy a 1/6 interest in a ski home up here in Colorado or beach home? Yes, if the property allows it and if it's set up legally that way. Of course you can. And then, of course, then that saves money. You're not paying $500,000. You're paying 1/6 or 1/8 or however the interval ownership is set up. That's another way that you can obviously do it. Now, one more thing with these second homes is certain people get rooked in to these second homes in places that, and let me back up on the rooked. Here's what can happen though on a second home. If let's say you absolutely have to have the income from renting it part of the year when you're not using it, you have to be careful that where you're buying doesn't have a natural disaster. Guys, let's use Florida. Let's go right back to Florida. Let's go to Cape Coral, Fort Myers area. Look at what just happened this year. Even if your property is not obliterated, so let's say Irma or Charlie or Andrew, one of these monster storms comes through your second home destination and just tears apart every building on the beach, or a fire up here in Colorado, but your crib's okay. You're like, hell yeah. But the perception of the public changes. So then you have that, ooh, I don't want to go there. Not to mention the roads are tore up for a while. It doesn't look sexy. Cape Coral, Fort Myers area, Fort Myers Beach looks like a nuclear bomb hit it. So, do you really think you're going to appeal to some European family that wants to rent in Florida and enjoy the sunshine, your nuclear bomb beach, when you just bought that $500,000 property that you need the rental income from? So, I'm making a huge point that you have to budget out for natural disasters, fires, earthquakes, wherever you're buying at. You have to think, if a natural disaster hits, even if you get insurance, loss of use. And you can purchase loss of use insurance if, depending on the insurance company, if it's a rental, this and that, talk to your insurance agent. But I've had a lot of people make the mistake of buying a second home. We had this back in Pinellas County years ago after the BP oil spill up in the Gulf. I lost a big deal in Yacht Club Estates over that. The perception, even though the oil spill really didn't affect us too much, the perception of the public, oh my God, you're going to have, motor oil all over the Intracoastal. And so I had a family back out of a big deal on the Intracoastal. A lot of people decided not to come down. Red tide, same thing. We've had a lot of problems with red tide in Florida. So when you're buying these second homes, I want you to always think about what's the natural disaster and can I afford it? And also financing, back to that just for a moment. The rates tend to be a little higher. So you can't use that rate that you go on the loan calculator on the internet. Don't just automatically assume that that rate is going to apply to that second home. The last part is, let's talk about how to get a good deal. Now, guys, I cannot tell you how many times over the years there have been opportunities out the ass in new emerging markets if you time it right to make a killing, not just on primary residence, but a second home. Roads that, let's say, Winter Park up here in Colorado for years, it was very hard to get up the mountain to Winter Park. It was treacherous. They widened the road. A multi-billion-dollar multinational company bought the resort or the rights to the resort or the management of the resort. And so Winter Park's values, guess what they did? They went way up because people that used to just go to Vail or Breckenridge or whatever, like, well, shit, now I can go to Winter Park and this new resort's taking it over and I don't have to worry I'm going to kill my family driving off a cliff. And so knowing the second home market, is there a new developer? Is there a new trend? Is there something that a developer's doing, a city is doing, zoning changes? And I can give another video on all that stuff, but studying, if you pick 3 or 4 areas in the country that you say, like, John, I really am, oh my God, I gotta, okay, pick 3 or 4 areas and then study them. Study the shit out of those areas. What's emerging? What is the dynamic of the population? The population shift. Are they growing? Is there a scarcity of land that drives prices up? Is there some new happening event? One of hundreds of different things, but timing that pop, because second homes, remember, little different. Primary residences tend to be driven by, of course, work centers and schools and major this and that. Second home's a little different. What vacation amenities, what activities are there? What is changing about that area? Is there a population shift? Like Florida, right? Everywhere from New York, New Jersey, work from home over COVID kind of poured down into Florida. If you guys would have timed that a couple of years ago, as some of our clients did, on those $220,000 homes are $450,000 now. So, if you guys want to talk to me on an individual basis, message me, call me, or give me a bunch of questions. I can put a Q&A. Maybe it'd be better if you guys texted me a whole bunch of questions and answers. If I don't have the answers, I don't have the answers to everything, guys. I'm researching like everybody else. I'll go and I'll put a answers video together. I'll pick your questions offline, and I'll just one at a time, or maybe we can even do a live webinar. There are some emerging areas now in the country that I know we've got this kind of hyper bubble, I feel, going on in a lot of the United States. I still think there are a couple areas, though, that are undervalued now for second homes. Give me a text, an email, call, Desert Talent Associates, modernlodges.com. It's easy enough to remember. You can email me, brokercolorado@gmail.com, or brokerpinellas, Pinellas @gmail.com, 727-452-3506. I'm on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, all that good stuff. Facebook, so shoot me a message anytime. Hope you guys are having a wonderful wherever the heck you are. I miss you guys, for my friends that I haven't seen in ages. And bless you very much, and I will talk to you later.